Hello, I'm Alison Hargreaves from guidesforbrides.co.uk, and this evening I am really pleased to be joined by Sarah Hayward, international wedding planner and star of UK TV's The Wedding Fixer earlier on this year. Sarah works all around the world creating incredible weddings and events, and she is now hugely involved in raising awareness of the financial strains being put on the wedding industry right here in the UK. So welcome this evening, Sarah.
Thanks for having me on again. I think we did this in the first lockdown, so there's a real sense of deja vu tonight.
As you say, it's very nice to be back and now have a little bit more of an idea of where we are going forward, and perhaps more of a picture now as we go into this second lockdown of where things are heading, and perhaps not quite so frightening for the wedding industry, having that little bit more of an idea of what's going on.
Yeah, I guess what we know is that we won't know much, and that we've got used to operating in this environment where we're never sure what will happen next. So we're just used to the uncertainty now.
Yeah, I suppose that's certainly one way to put it, isn't it? And the particular, I know you've been very vocal about the plight of wedding businesses in particular through this, and raising awareness of why weddings are a little bit different perhaps from other parts of the event sector.
Well, all our business, and I'm hugely aware when I do these things that not just businesses who are watching us, but couples who are planning to get married. Sorry, there's a noise going on in the room next to me. Would you mind just stopping with that noise? That what I don't want to do is sound as though I'm flippant about what's actually people's special days. But with my business hat on, the thing is, these days aren't lost, they're deferred. Most people have postponed, we know that. So that business, unlike other areas events, there's only one Glastonbury. You know, if there was a concert in the O2 or whatever it might be, these events are gone. But wedding business is postponed, therefore it's deferred business. But of course, we haven't been able to operate in any commercially viable form since before lockdown. So even the most robust business is having trouble. I mean, they use that word pivot, but pivot to what? Pivot to what in a lockdown? So what we're trying to get decision makers to understand is we're special. We're special because that business is still there. Around about anything between about 12 and 14 billion pounds worth of business from 2020 has been deferred. So we just need a bridge to the other side. And it doesn't take, you know, a world-class mathematician to work out how much tax and VAT the Treasury gets from that 12 to 14 billion. So it's in their interests to back us going forward, but there's just so much noise out there. I think we're lost in some of the noise. We are making progress. They have accepted some, if you like, strategy ideas on moving forward, but letting an entire sector fail just is bonkers. It doesn't make any sense to me. Forget that this is my business. If I was just looking in from the outside, I'd be thinking, why is anybody letting a viable sector with business ready to go the moment we can get the numbers up? Why let us fail? It doesn't make any sense.
And I think very often people don't realise just the high skill level. It's thousands of really artisan little businesses that, you know, where is that skill going to come from? That's not something,
exactly.
You know, if you said to somebody, go and make a wedding cake, they would have no idea. Go and make a wedding dress. You know, this is a huge amount of skill we've got there that potentially...
And it's world renowned. We're world renowned for the weddings that we do here. And I don't know what the luxury sector that I work in is worth when we're trying to do some work on it. It might be worth up to 2 billion. And the Asian sector, where there are huge weddings, the African sector, the Jewish sector, these weddings are huge and the spends are enormous, but some of those sectors do need the numbers to go up before they will agree to go ahead with their celebrations. That's a whole other discussion that we could have. But it doesn't make sense to not back a winning horse. It doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Yeah, and what are all of these business owners and those that work? I mean, I think your reckoning was about 400,000 people work in this industry. What have they been doing the last 8 months?
So it's anything between 400 and 500,000. Nobody really knows. And the other bonkers thing about weddings is, if you run a business at the end of the year, for those of you who don't do it, at the end of the year, you file your annual return. I think they call it a confirmation statement. And you have to choose from a list of a list of what your business does. There is nothing on there to say you work in the wedding or party planning business. So you tick a box that says other. So there's no way of even knowing what these numbers are. So various people have done surveys and they jealously guard their surveys and say, theirs are the accurate ones, but nobody really knows. But it could be between 400,000 and 500,000 full and part-time workers. And there's 278,599 weddings in the last recorded year, which was 2017. That's a lot of people going to a lot of weddings. If you consider that maybe the average wedding has 80 to 100 guests, if you're thinking of the typical middle of the road wedding, and then you multiply that by nearly 279,000, that's a lot of meals being prepared, a lot of waiters and waitresses, a lot of venue owners, a lot of people in venue support. Then for every wedding, there's a gift list. And there are various studies that all agree that usually a gift of around £75 in value is given per couple. Just top that up times 279,000. There's a lot of money spent in retail. All 279,000 of those brides will buy a dress. The grooms will buy or rent an outfit. Then most couples will go on a honeymoon. Some will have a stag and a hen night. Guests often go out and buy new outfits for weddings. And so it goes on. So the ripple effect of allowing us to fail is huge. And I think the question was, what have people been doing? Well, I know of somebody who sings in an extraordinary band who is now an Amazon delivery driver. And he says, I don't care, I'll just do this till I get to the other side. I appear to have become a sort of full-time amateur lobbyist. I've done one wedding in 2020. The team has done a 17-person wedding. When did we do that? At the beginning of October. That's it. And that's our entire revenue for 2020. So I'm trading at a huge loss. My business is half the size that it was. I know there's no point in returning if I don't return with my event team. So they've been furloughed. All our 2020 business was either cancelled or moved to next year. I'm not confident about next year. I'm going to be really honest, not confident about the numbers being up. And as you may know, I do a lot of destination weddings, or a lot of our clients are from overseas coming here. So we've got Sri Lankans, Russians, Indonesians, Americans, South Africans for next year, all over Europe. I can't see those nationalities feeling confident enough to travel in large numbers unless there's a vaccine. And even then, will people really want to travel in large numbers? So for me, unless my pivot is small, intimate weddings, which of course we can do, it's not a problem. But I would imagine all the postponed weddings, they've already planned their weddings. They don't need to come to me. So it's new business I'm looking for. And I think that's what we all have to do. We have to stop bleating on about how bad it all is. And we have to think about how we're going to encourage what must be about 250,000 newly engaged couples over the course of 2020. What about them? And I can see them looking in. If you are one, I can see them looking in thinking, gosh, is this industry going to survive? Should I be putting money down? Well, my company, we've been working on a pandemic charter, a code of conduct for our weddings going forward, that if they were postponed due to government restrictions, we would postpone without charge, and looking at a fair cancellation policy if the client chooses to cancel rather than postpone. So we've been working on that. Most of the suppliers we work with are happy to sign up to that. I mean, I would really encourage suppliers to think about that, because just imagine if all 250,000 newly engaged couples immediately started planning their weddings for late 2021, 2022, we'd be up and running, we'd be overwhelmed, we'd be back to work. And so that, I think, is what we all must focus on. And look, we're we're a creative problem-solving industry, and we've never needed assistance before, not one penny. And we built our industry from the ground up, and it's now worth, it's now worth more than live sporting events and more than live arts events. It's worth 3 times more than live arts, but we haven't got an Andrew Lloyd Webber to bang on about it on News at 10. So we've been left behind. And I think we've just got to accept that we might not get any assistance. And I haven't given up, by the way, I've absolutely not given up on that. But we can't just wait for someone to come and rescue us. We've got to really think what we're going to do, support one another and get to the other side. And if people would just start booking with us and they felt that the booking terms were fair, we could really start getting back to work. And one of the other things that myself and some other businesses have suggested to government is some kind of wedding deposit scheme that might have some government backing. We've been looking into a wedding bond so that couples would know that the money was safe in the event of something happening to that business. And that requires some really good brains to work on that. And I sat this afternoon, I now sit on I was a founding member of the One Industry, One Voice campaign. So I sit on that. And today I went to their events task force meeting, and other people have been working on that. So it's also time that as the wedding industry, we didn't just look at events through the prism of weddings. We need to be looking at wider industry and what they're doing, because there's such great ideas out there. And if we had a bit more joined up thinking and stopped duplicating all the work, we might get there faster. And wider events, this is how bonkers it is. Wider events is looked after by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. Weddings is looked after by the Secretary of State for Business. So we're not even looked after by the same ministers. Whether those ministers talk or not, I don't really hold up very much hope that unless they're sat around the cabinet table, they actually talk to one another. I never thought I'd know this much about the machinery of government, and I don't claim to be an expert on it, but I understand, you know, the Chancellor goes off and makes decisions, and unless that particular minister has gone and made a representation, you know, why would the Chancellor hear about the plight of the wedding industry? So there are all these hurdles to jump just to be heard. And they're fighting a global pandemic. Looks like there's problems with Brexit. No wonder we've been forgotten. And we've got to get on with it at the same time as try to be heard.
And it probably opens up that question of, are we an event sector or are we hospitality? Because we were all really hopeful when there was all of this support for hospitality. Fantastic, there's going to be VAT breaks, it's going to be 5% for weddings, and then suddenly, no, you're not actually hospitality, you're events.
Again, I have been doing this for a couple of decades now. When people ask me, you know, what do you do? I say I'm in hospitality. If I'm not in hospitality as an event producer, what am I in? And the people that I employ who've been to hospitality school, like, what are we if we're not hospitality? And that was a damning blow. I mean, at the beginning, I was like, great, a rates holiday. I went to my local council because there were grants for hospitality businesses, and they were what they do is they grade or they assign your business a code when you first register for your rates. So I couldn't understand why they weren't answering me. And they said, oh no, you're not in hospitality. And they said, your office is a workshop. Like, my office isn't a workshop, but I couldn't access anything. So I let my office go, actually, which was another devastating blow, but another story. But I just let it go. I thought, well, we're not going to be returning for a year. We don't need an office. So let's not pay the rent and then we won't have to pay the rate. So that's extended our financial runway. It's causing problems now because we need somewhere to meet. I do have a small office in Oxfordshire, so that's where we're having to work from. But
And actually that really answers the question, I would say, when we were talking about deposits and needing deposit protection schemes and so on. Actually, what we've seen is there's not businesses just going out of business. You know, there's one or two, it's real exceptions. It's people are just really hunkering down. They're getting rid of all of their costs. They're losing their business premises. They're moving, you know, they're finding ways to make it work. and just, you know, stopping their business, putting it all on hold so that they are here for next year in whatever way they can. So it's not so much a risk of losing deposits, it's just these poor businesses going through real hardship, making sure.
And I am worried about those that we don't hear about. You know, how many businesses have just gone under quietly without us knowing. And you know, you and I hear about the larger businesses that go under, and when the forgotten limited say they've been forgotten, I think they could easily go under without us even knowing. And then there's all the sole traders. I am nervous about who's not going to be there, but I do have faith that people are resilient, that just by working in a sector like ours, you're resourceful, and you will think of ways to come back. Whether it's fair or not doesn't feel very fair. And I'm very nervous about the expertise that might be lost in the particular part of the sector that I work in. You know, some of the events that we do, we have several hundred people working on them, and a lot of those people are techies and scenic designers, and they've all got huge warehouses full of kit, and that requires expertise. Like, it's no good me being able to take on a huge, very high budget wedding and not having anything to hang the lights from, and then discovering there's nowhere to rent the lights from because they went out of business because they couldn't afford to keep their warehouses going. And you know, what about all the kit that has to stay up to date? And we are world renowned. We are considered, the British, to be the best at social events. And you'll know, this time last year, and anybody who follows me on Instagram, this time last year, we hosted a luxury wedding summit. It happens every year somewhere in Europe. It had never happened in a city, and it had never happened in England before. And we were so confident that as an industry, we paid for it. Like, I didn't go asking for any money. I paid my part of it. Everybody literally gave their venues and their services and their supplies free of charge. That's how confident we were just 12 months ago. And we hosted 250 of the top wedding professionals in the world. And you attended, I know. You know, and it was an amazing 5 days. And I was posting it all last week because it was a year on. I was thinking, you know, now, you know, are these people even in business? Because the bigger you are, the more danger you've been in. And you know, the bigger your business is and the more people that you employ, the more it has cost you to access the help. So I know a lot of people say, you know, oh, well, you know, you've had furlough. Furloughs actually cost us money. I'm very, very grateful for it. But it's cost me thousands, tens of thousands to keep the team going. And the job support scheme requires you to employ them, but we've got no work to employ people to do. So we've still got to employ them to access the help that's on offer. And I was talking the other day to a caterer. He has over 200 employees. Well, just contributing what works out at about 26% of everybody's salary, month after month after month after month, on 200 staff. I mean, you've got to have a lot of reserves in the bank to get to the other side. And if the big companies go, there will be a trickle down effect. And if the venues go, what are we going to do if there are no venues to work at? Not everyone wants to get married in a 5-star London hotel, and they're struggling as well. So it is kind of bonkers because there is a lot of expertise in our industry. And I mean, I know I just talk from as a small business owner with a small team. It's taken me, you know, 16 years to build up the expertise that we've now got to be able to just pick up and do these events. And we specialize a lot in last minute events for high net worth families. I mean, we can plan anything, literally anything. We did the wedding last spring in St. Moritz for 840 Indians over 5 days that included building an entire winter wonderland on a car park. And we were hired 7 weeks before with a clean sheet of paper. We came up with the ideas. We were getting things signed off while we were building it. And we took many of the rides from the London Winter Wonderland. I mean, that takes years to be able to build up the kind of expertise that gives you not only the confidence, but the ability to pull a team together. I mean, there were thousands of people working on that event. Now, I wouldn't even know if half of them were And
Around.
and I can sort of hear people thinking, oh, yeah, that's fine at the top end of the industry. What about further down? But if I go, it will go down like a deck of cards. Think of all the people and all the suppliers that I employ year in, year out.
Yeah.
It's not every single part of this sector needs to be maintained because we all have customers.
Yeah.
We live close to one another, and you'll know my village. There's a village hall there, lovely one. And I watch the kind of weddings that happen there. Yeah, they're probably not very costly, and there's probably a lot of DIY stuff going on in there. But even then, the small local caterer needs to be in business still for that wedding.
Yeah.
The small local cake maker who bakes out of her kitchen, she still needs to be in business in order for couples to employ her. So it doesn't matter where you fit in the chain, you're vital for us to get to the other side.
Yeah, and I think hearing about the size weddings that you work in, hopefully that gives real confidence to the couples that have got the more moderate weddings planned for next year, and I think are understandably twitchy, and we've been saying, no, hold your nerve. And it's largely because when we speak about large weddings, we're talking about these 500, 700, 900 person weddings. And other people many people assume that when we're talking about large weddings, we're talking about 100 guests. It's not. It's these really big ones that involve
several hundred,
thousands of people working behind the scenes, as well as the several hundred people there on the day. So, and there's a lot of people in the industry who are really pushing towards that being possible. And therefore, the smaller ones are going to happen way, way, way before that. And the sort of the moderate size ones, that's going to come just within that process.
And I do think if you just want to get married, so the one 17-person wedding that we did do was for a couple who were due to get married with us next year. And we were chatting about whether or not to put a deposit down for a multi-day destination event. And she just said, I'm so fed up. We've been together 9 years. They're an older couple. And she said, I just want to be married. And it was the day after the hotels were all allowed to open. And I'd happened to go out for the first time that day. And I'd gone to the Ritz for a drink. They invited me into the garden. I thought, well, I'll go to the Ritz for my first outing. And so I got talking to the team there. And I said to her, I was in the Ritz this afternoon. Why don't you do it there? And she said, oh, could we? And I said, let's just do it. Let's just do it. And it was one of the most heartfelt events we have ever produced. It was so moving. And they could have had 30. And they decided they'd go for 17. Because that was their really close circle, and they formed the bubbles. So we did it a month later, but maybe 3.5 weeks later. And all the people formed bubbles so that we had 2 distinct bubbles in the room. And it was so, really, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. And I don't cry at weddings. I'm like a hard bitch. I was, choked. I was like, and it felt so good to be working again. And of course, it was a Ritz wedding. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't ridiculous. And it was beautiful. And I felt it was an opportunity for us to really support some of the people we know have been having a tough time. So the bride, she was amazing. She agreed to go to local independent flower growers. So we knew exactly where all the flowers came. We worked with McQueen's in London for it. And they went and they picked the flowers themselves. And we went to New Covent Garden, which is really struggling. The flower market is really struggling to get all the foliage. And we made sure where it had come from. We used all British food. I made a point of going to suppliers, perhaps that we wouldn't ordinarily go to, who were local in London. We knew they needed the work. And it was an amazing, amazing day. And I felt it was also a celebration of the British wedding industry and everything that it stands for. And if you do want to get married, people like me, we can plan it like that. I mean, I could plan your wedding on Saturday. It's not a problem. We know who to call. We know what to do. And I'd love to do more of those, actually. I'd love to do more of those. And there are amazing places up and down the land to do them. And this work, it may not be hugely profitable, it may not be profitable at all, but it would keep us ticking over. Right now, my biggest ambition is simply to break even. If I could break even rather than be trading at this huge loss, and I can make money as well, fantastic. But I just want to keep working, and so do my team.
And
it's just want to keep
really
working.
nice. I have loved seeing how resourceful couples have been. I mean, not every couple has the benefit of a wedding planner to help them, but their venues have just stepped up and
really stepped up to the plate.
And
it's been beautiful to watch.
3 days, you know, I think because the last lockdown happened like that, there was no notice at all. This time there's been that little bit more notice. They've had a few days and they've been cramming the weddings in, bringing everyone forward. Oh, it's been absolutely amazing to see people just saying, do you know what, I just want to get married. I don't care if it's only 15 of us. I don't care if it's just the 2 of us and 2 witnesses. We're just going to do it now and we'll party later. And all of those events, I think, just as you said, they have been phenomenal.
And we all know that one size doesn't fit all. That's not going to work for everyone. But if it does work for you, you know, think about it. One of my teams suggested yesterday, why don't we just offer a really small fixed fee and just get out there and be working? Like, just do it. And I think we will look at it. And it is really fun when you get to, you've got time to really get to know people and get to know the guests in a small event like that. And if you're nervous, I mean, I'm quite nervous about coronavirus. I'm, you know, that bit older. My husband is that bit older and we've been shielding. So I had to come out to do that. And I came out at the beginning of lockdown for a few days, you know, and then I went home again. We're shielding at the moment. It is the case that there is a very serious virus out there. And not everybody is going to want to be in a room full of a lot of people. And I assume we're not going to go from 0 to 150. We're going to go from, you know, if we're lucky, back up to the 15, back up to the 30, and gradually as things open up and the test and trace, it's not called that anymore, is it? Track and trace works, thanks God. And as a vaccine rolled out, people, you know, will emerge. And, you know, and that's why we need a task force. We need a task force so that can report and have a direct channel to government, and that can give us a little bit of warning about what the thinking is, and even better, give us a little bit of let us have a little bit of input on how we can make these things work. Because it is ridiculous that Tesco and Asda are trusted with our safety, and the UK events industry, which does this all the time, has to keep people safe all the time and in large numbers, that we're not trusted. It doesn't make any sense. So we have to be able to engage with decision makers in a workable way. I think we have to stop shouting at them, because I don't think they're interested in working with people who shout at them all the time. I've been very guilty of that myself, you know, over the summer. You know, I wouldn't want to work with anyone who just wanted to shout at me and tell me how crap I was all the time. We have to find a way of uniting the industry. This industry needs to unite. It definitely needs to unite. There's too much, what's the word? There's too much bickering about who's right and who's wrong and what's this thing. Doesn't matter. Whatever it is, put it to one side. The biggest thing must be consumer confidence and getting back to work, however that's going to work over these 6 months. And it's going to be 6 months at least. Of course it is. And it's bonkers to just say, well, this is the mission. It's got to encompass everything that we all want to achieve. And
at the moment,
I'm hopeful of that.
What sort of things are you seeing venues and businesses doing at the moment to prepare for that? Because we're all looking at the fact that it's probably, you know, we've been prepared for the fact this is probably the situation, or at least the weddings for 15 is probably the situation till the end of March. But can anything be done at the moment? Because it takes a long time to put things in place. What's being done?
So I think we all have to put our own businesses in order. And that requires constant reassessment. I'm sure, like me, everybody else, you know, Sunday was sitting doing the maths again. You know, more layoffs have had to be made. So that's the first thing we have to do. I was talking to somebody earlier today. You know, I'm also a person who pays myself by a dividend through the limited company. You know, somebody was complaining about that, and I was thinking, you know what? We all did that because it's more tax efficient. That's why we did it. We did it to pay less tax. So we need to shut up and start thinking about how we manage ourselves going forward. It's an own goal that none of us foresaw that, but I have always been very prudent, and I have always run my business. I started to build it, I built it up very gradually, and I've always left reserves in there for a rainy day. And as you know, I do courses and things. I mean, I'm a great believer, if you don't make enough money, it's because you don't charge enough. Like, if you don't charge properly, you won't make enough money. So I always built up to a point where we could run the business for a year if we never got an event. I used to joke about it. I mean, never in a million years did I think that I would literally not trade in any commercially viable form for a year. And now it's looking like it might be 18 months, or God forbid, longer than that. So the only thing I could do was lay people off. So we had to lay off all the support staff, and I just kept the event team and a bookkeeper, so that we can go a bit further. We've got to start financially planning. And if there is no money, it's all very well the government say, oh, we've lent you all this money. Well, I've got a massive, great loan, but I'd have to earn money to pay it back. So that needs looking at. And we need a bridge. We need a bridge. And then we can all financially plan to how we get our businesses to the other side.
And actually, that's going to be all the more important, because just to clarify, when you're saying 18 months, and I can imagine everyone for next year going, oh my goodness, is our wedding not happening?
I'm meaning until we get back up to trading back as we were before. I don't mean we're not going to be producing wedding. No, I mean, like, if you're a business owner, you're thinking, I've got projections and forecasts. I can't remember what the question was now. It's what people have been doing.
I think realistically, it is going to be 18 months, because what we're seeing is that couples have been nervous about next summer. So although we as an industry are fairly confident we're going to have everything, we know we can have everything in place, and it's just a matter of making sure the government let us do what we know we can do by the end of March, beginning of April, and that we can do that safely, and we can demonstrate, in those first weeks, that everything's fine. And as we know, weddings haven't been super spreaders in the UK, therefore let's be able to demonstrate that with larger numbers. But because there hasn't been that level of confidence we were originally expecting, to start off with, we were saying, wow, 2021 is going to be insane. It's going to be every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we'll have weddings.
Still could be.
As you say, it could well be. We know there's that huge pent-up market, desperate to get married. And I think it's going to come down to whether we can get those numbers up early enough in the spring that all of those couples that are going, shall I push it to 2022? They'll all go, no, thank goodness for that. We can just get married as planned in April, May, June, July 2021. And
I think sorry, I'm interrupting. I think we've all learned even more how to be flexible and creative. So I'm not so worried now about taking on, we're obviously pitching for new work for next year in 2022. I'm not so worried now about hearing that these events have to be postponed. Like, I'm really good at postponing weddings now. It doesn't frighten me. It doesn't frighten me. And we as a team, we're thinking about that all the time. I mean, we're looking at some events that we've got May and June next year now, thinking, maybe we should be thinking about a plan B just in case. And both we and the clients are not facing that with the same trepidation that we did the first time around, because it's become a way of life. And it's become a way of life for all of us in all kinds of things that we do. I think also remember that we're all professionals at this. So most people have never planned a wedding before, but everybody that they're working with has. So we're also learning that it's difficult to pick up a wedding and move the whole thing, that you've got to have some flexibility. So we're finding, we've got A, B, and C suppliers all working together, so that if one of them can't provide a service, another one can. So there are ways of us juggling. And if we could just encourage people to start booking our services, we'll get back to work. We'll get back to work quite quickly.
Yeah. And I think the suppliers have been really, really flexible. We've had a few emails from couples with weddings in April saying, I need to make a decision by the end of January, because that's when, you know, my next payment's due, this is due, I've got to make the decision. There's so much more flexibility now. All of the suppliers, all of the venues know exactly what everyone's going through, and they're just wanting to make it work. They're wanting the wedding to happen at the first opportunity for the sake of their couples, so that those couples can move on, and they'll just find a way to make it work. You know, as you said.
Yeah, and I mean the venues, of course. I mean, I really feel for venues, because they have to have so many staff just to keep themselves going, and it's not as easy for them perhaps to move a wedding to another date. They have all. I mean, that's where couples need to be flexible. Just because you had a Friday or a Saturday, if you're going to need to postpone, you might not get a Friday or a Saturday. However, I think we're living in a very different world, and that when we emerge from this, employers will even be thinking about their workforces in different ways. So I'm looking at new contracts for all my staff from January. We were doing that anyway, and I'm thinking of moving us to a 6-day week, where we have a sort of fluid way of working, because a lot of our clients are obviously working themselves. So we're often on calls on Saturdays if we're not actually doing weddings. So I think employers will be much more flexible about the days that staff work and don't work. You might be able to take a Tuesday off and work instead on a Saturday. As an employer, I don't really mind when people work, so long as we get the work done. It doesn't bother me. They can start at 6 o'clock in the morning and finish mid-afternoon for all I care, as long as the work's done. Yeah. So I think, don't be thinking, oh, if I plan a wedding on a Tuesday, no one will come. I think they will. I think in the new world, life won't just be 5 days working a week, 2 days is the weekend.
So any other trends or changes you can see coming out of this, how weddings will just be fundamentally different? Because one of the worries a month or so ago, when we saw all of these incredible intimate weddings, is we were saying, is anyone going to want to go back to that big party?
They will. Yeah, they will. I think they will. I mean, some won't, but I think they will. But I do think we'll be far more mindful of who's on our guest lists. So we might see, you know, 200 goes down to 150, 100 goes down to 80, because you've certainly learned who your friends are through all of this. And who really matters to you. And I'm always joking with my clients when they say, oh, I can't get my guest list down. I'm like, right, let's sit down, show it to me. I'm like, who is this person? It's someone they work with. Is this person going to be in your life for the rest of your life? If they say no, I'm like, why are we inviting them to your wedding? Why? And there's this, you know, invite all the B list in the evening. Like, I know one wants to be on the B list. Just stop all that. Just don't have them.
I like it, yeah. And what about things like weekend weddings? Can you see more of that, or as in people getting together for a long weekend, actually spending more quality time together? Now that
I know the buzzword for a couple of years, it's, you know, all about the experience, and it really is, and it's about the gathering and the celebrating together. So I think people will go away, and we're very lucky in Britain. We have some amazing venues to go away and have, you know, a couple of weekends. And I do a lot overseas, amazing venues overseas as well. So I think people will be still doing it. It might take a little bit of time, but, you know, remember when lockdown ended and everybody just took to the streets, and, you know, you saw them in Soho, literally spilling onto the streets and partying all night. We're craving human contact.
Yeah.
So I do think it will recover.
Yeah, those first weddings, once as the numbers start to build up, I think are going to be the ones that will be
amazing.
Party all night, and yeah. And there's talk at the moment from the point of view Law Commission are obviously looking at the proposed changes to the law. And we don't know, because of the delays from, you know, Parliament seem to be slightly busy with various other things at the moment.
Yeah, we'll be at the bottom of the list, that's for sure.
Probably at the bottom of the list. But that was originally due to be potentially being passed next summer, which would then have
amazing.
As you say, if that happens, and that's potentially outdoor weddings, a lot less restrictions on where you can get married, how you can get married.
Which of course is what happens in Scotland, because in Scotland it's the celebrant who holds the license. So you get married on the side of a mountain. I love doing weddings in Scotland. You can literally marry anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, and why not?
Yeah, yeah, and so much.
I believe it all goes back to the days where everybody had to be absolutely certain that the girl was the girl was who she said she was, and the boy was who he said he was, and you know, those days are gone. Yeah. Hopefully, I say that. I mean, I'm the ambassador for this charity, Vow to End Child Marriage. Did you know every 3 seconds a girl under the age of consent somewhere in the world is married? Every 3 seconds. So that's about 12 million young girls a year, and that's on the increase this year. It's a very complex problem. It's to do with poverty and lack of education. So yeah, that has not been lost on me, that I'm fighting for people prevented from getting married. And on the other side of the coin, there are up to 25% of weddings that happen globally are with a girl under the age of consent.
Which is extraordinary to think about in 2020, isn't it? And as you say, we're fighting for the right. Were you surprised that weddings were stopped entirely from Thursday?
Yes. Yes. I think it might be against the International Convention of Human Rights. I'm sure if it is, I'm sure someone will challenge it.
Yes.
The danger is, of course, every time we challenge something, the result we get isn't what we wanted. Yeah. So you can, under special circumstances, I assume people towards the end of their life, things like that. But we need to be careful, because what we could ask for is that it'd be allowed to go ahead and they say, okay, it's 2 people and a witness. So, which isn't really what people want either. So.
And actually, I think a lot of people were feeling that the 15-person wedding just wasn't viable for most businesses, and it was putting some venues absolutely fine, but some venues were being put under pressure to hold weddings that they were losing money on. So in some ways, weirdly, ironically, being closed is better than being very slightly open. And the problem we've had for months is that technically weddings have been allowed to take place, but it's like saying to a restaurant, you can be open, but you can only have 1 table in at a time. You know, it doesn't work.
I'm really going to try and use that as an own goal against decision makers, because we have now actually been prohibited from working.
Yeah.
Whereas before we were all getting the answer from the MPs. It said, oh, we're happy to say that, we've worked hard and weddings for 15 people. Weddings cannot happen at all. So we are prohibited from trading. So if I switch on news at 10 one more time to hear the bleating from sectors that have been open all summer, I am actually going to lose it, because we have not been able to work in any commercially viable form. And now we're prohibited from working. So let's have access to all the things that everybody else has had access to.
Yeah, no, quite right. Couldn't agree more. And looking at, you do a lot of international weddings. Are those going to be a lot slower? You said about people coming to the UK. Will those pick up the other countries? I know Italy has been up and running. They've been having quite big weddings.
They're shut down again now. But in Portugal, you can do a wedding in some parts of the country, even at the moment, for 50 people. Yeah. So I think wherever we are in the world, there are challenges, and wherever we're working. My concern for my own business is whether the guests will want to travel in the way that they did before.
Yeah.
So, but we have a lot of international work coming to London, and we do have British clients that we work with in London and around the UK and Scotland. And we were about to open an office in Scotland, and I think we still will. We'll open it after Christmas, up in Edinburgh. Love working in Scotland, so we do a lot of work there. Love it up there. Whether they want me now, I think, am I allowed to cross the border now? I'm not even sure, but that's what I'm looking at, doing more at home and more in Scotland and less overseas. And we were doing that anyway, because I was just exhausted traveling all the time.
Yeah.
And it sounds very glamorous, and it's just not.
And I think
hanging around in airports.
One of the other Law Commission proposals is that there are less residency requirements, so people don't have to be here for days and days before.
Yes, that would be really helpful. That would be really helpful.
And I think that's looking quite likely, and you know, it's
Yes.
one of the slightly strange things here that it's hard to get married. We've got these amazing historic buildings. I know a lot of the
Yes.
a lot of Engage was in the royal palaces, you know, being able to use those sort of venues, and there are couples from all over the world that would come and have incredible weddings, you know, the sort of 4 weddings and a funeral type events here, given the opportunity. So if that is heading our way, for those suppliers that are taking your advice and saying, actually, you just need to be charging more and that's the way to get through this sort of thing, if they're wanting to aim high, is there anything they can be doing, using their time off over the winter to be upskilling and to be starting to push for those big international events?
I think if you're looking to work with high net worth families, what I always say at my courses is, you know, if you don't understand luxury, you can't sell it. So you need to understand what it is and what people want. And above anything else, if you want to work at the really top end, service is everything. Getting world-class service is everything. And what that means is that you are on call 24/7, because that's how a family like that works. And you've got to be prepared to do things that you don't ordinarily think are within your remit. Because if you're planning one of their life-affirming events, often for many people, for overseas people, particularly from certain cultures, these are also business events. This is where a lot of business gets done. And it's, you know, it's a great honor to be invited to somebody's daughter or son's wedding. So a lot of business gets done. And there's a lot of face to be saved at these events. So you have to understand that. I would say if you're going to work with a culture or a nationality that you don't know and haven't worked for before, do your homework. Do your homework. You really need to understand what whoever it is you're working for, how they like to operate. Because even though people might be coming to you in England for what they think is a British wedding, they'll still want to bring some of their cultural elements. It took me years to learn that, and I'd be arguing with people saying, no, that's not the best thing to do. But, you know, if somebody wants to do something, that is the best thing for them to do. But I think that we have a huge untapped resource here of people believe that we, the Brits, do things very stylishly. And there's a lot of new money in the world that wants to tap into that and to be seen to be doing things properly. So make sure you understand what properly is before you start selling it. And also don't think that wealthy people will just pay you more for the sake of it. They won't. You've got to be giving some value to charge high fees. You really, and some of that is going to be expertise. You can't just decide you want to work in my market. I started at the very bottom. My business started, you know, I was working out on the landing of my home, and the first budget I ever worked with was £16,000. I wouldn't say what the biggest budget we've ever worked with, but I can tell you it's a lot more than that. It's millions. And you need to work up to that gradually. And I've done that every single event. You know, we're just trying to take it up a notch, not necessarily on revenue, but in terms of the overall experience of the event. I'm just up a notch every event, learning as we go along, because you can't just suddenly decide that this is what you do. But I feel like I haven't worked for so long, I can't even remember what it was like to work.
And that advice is the same, whatever it is you do within the wedding. You're talking from the perspective of a planner, but even as the, you know, the florist, you're going to get that call at 6 in the morning of, can I meet you at, you know, XYZ, and can we do this and can we change that right at the last minute? And no problem.
I remember I had a friend who is a very good photographer. She's become a friend. And so, you never hire me for your events. I was like, one photographer isn't going to do it. She's like, I've never missed a single shot. It's not about missing the shot. And so in the end, I hired her. This was years ago. I said, all right, we often take a photographer with us just to film the design, just to photograph the design. We often take a videographer as well, just to get the design, to make sure that we get it, because obviously it's quite opulent design that we do. I remember afterwards saying, okay, I get it now. Like we need a team of photographers because so much is going on. And unless you've worked in it, you couldn't possibly understand it, because there are weddings and then there are productions. And at some point you move from it being a wedding to it being a production. It still feels like a wedding, and to the client it's still a wedding, but there's so much more going on. And the logistics of that. And I remember maybe at the very beginning, I did 2 or 3 weddings with no assistants at all, just me and a clipboard. Like, never, ever do that. Like, never work as a single-handed planner if you want to be at this level. You've got to have someone with you, and then you build it up and you build it up and you build it up.
Yeah, and there's going to be those opportunities coming up if American and European wedding planners who were all at Engage this time last year, from conversations with them, they're looking to collaborate with businesses and planners and venues in the UK. So there's those huge
partnerships, overseas. I don't work like that because I've got a big enough team, but we'll often have a local fixer wherever we are, and it'll be someone I trust. And now it's the people that we've trained through our training courses all over the world. We've got people, and we know that they will work to our standard. And as I said before, for us, it's service. Is the client getting an amazing service alongside? But yes, there are those opportunities, and network. There's amazing opportunities to network right now digitally. All the digital conferences that are going on. I mean, I do think that we'll all want to go back to meeting in person, because that's the fun bit of speaking at a conference. It's not fun at all just sitting here talking to, not knowing who you're talking to. But I've met so many extraordinary people around the world by attending all manner of wedding conferences, and I really miss it. Actually, I miss being on the speaker circuit, so I've got quite a bit of that for next year if these events go ahead. And I've made friendships. In fact, I'm talking to some American planners tonight, because of course it's the election in America, so we're not speaking till 10:30 tonight. But it's a big day for them. And these are people I've met through speaking at conferences. And they, we help each other. So when they come to London, I'll help them, and I'll introduce suppliers, and vice versa when I'm working overseas. And I do think that we're not as good as we could be at collaboration. It's getting better, but there are no secret suppliers. So it doesn't, introduce them to people, and the better we are, the better everybody is. It raises the game. So I'm very much for collaborating and sharing the knowledge that we have.
I think that may change though after the last few months, where so many suppliers have, the number of introductions I make a day at the moment between different venues and people that might be able to help someone with this bit of information or that bit of information. It's constant, those introductions. And I think also having Zoom conversations, however sick we're getting of staring at
God, don't we just want to meet? Don't you just want to meet people?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
But actually,
you said to me the other day, let's just go for a walk. But unfortunately, I'm not even at home at the moment. I was like, that won't work. I'm miles and miles away. just to go for a walk with someone. Yeah,
absolutely. And you are you're speaking at the Bride Lux conference next week.
Yes, I was just speaking to them this afternoon. I'm going to be talking about the viability of the British wedding industry, and actually the global wedding industry. And I've been talking to other people from across the world who are all trying to do similar things, lobbying their own governments. So passing on that. We talk a little bit about vow to end child marriage as well, because that's kind of my thing at the moment. Trying to remember that actually it's not just about us. But yes, I mean, we've all got to think about how to get to the other side, really. And it's going to be really tough. I know it's going to be, despite everything I've said, I know it's going to be really, really tough. And I sit from a very privileged position of having been in business for a long time. Like you, we've been around a long time, and that's helped us build up healthy reserves that will get us to the other side. Means I'm going to have to work for 10 years more because the pension pot is now practically depleted. But it's going to be tough, and we're going to have to support one another. But if we could just work on igniting confidence, getting people booking with confidence, knowing that we're all going to get there to the other side. And let's face it, how amazing is it going to be when we get to the other side and we start working with couples and delivering their weddings? It's going to feel incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on that amazingly positive note. I think we're all really looking forward to we've got a lot of fight in us in this industry. We're working really hard, find the solutions, get to the other side, ignite that confidence so that our couples are there behind us and working with us to help us get there. And yeah, absolutely ready to deliver those weddings as soon as we're allowed to open. So Sarah, thank you very much for joining me tonight. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Bye.